With the rise of online marketing, its offline alternative, in other words, trade show marketing strategies, may seem to have lost a little bit of its appeal. However, for certain industries in the B2B space, it can be a very effective strategy. That said, without a strong trade show marketing strategy, the success of your efforts is not guaranteed. In this episode of the Predictable B2B Success podcast, we'll look at how to use a trade show marketing strategy to effectively market to enterprise and government clients, how to use trade show marketing to ensure a continual supply of leads, how to use influencer marketing for events to fuel growth, how to decide what sort of budget to allocate towards events and trade show marketing to gain a positive ROI. How to decide whether boosting brand awareness takes priority over generating leads in your trade show marketing strategy. Who you need to take along to execute on your trade show marketing strategy, the role of employee advocacy for trade show marketing strategies, and lead nurturing, along with a whole lot more. For now, let me introduce our guest. She is the CEO of Ruby Media Group, an award-winning public relations and social media marketing agency that helps companies leverage the power of content marketing to increase exposure. Over the past decade, she has consulted with small to large-scale businesses, including Equinox and IG Hotels, to name a few. Here are a few other things worth noting. She's a seasoned social media strategist with 10 plus years of building successful brands. She's led the social media strategy for Fortune 500 companies, as well as private medical practices. She's a sought-after digital strategist and consultant who delivers high-impact social media training programs for executives. And she is a trusted media source and frequent on-air commentator on social media, tech trends, and crisis communications, and often speaks on Fox News, CNBC, Good Morning America, amongst other networks. Kris Ruby, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Kris, I'm curious, you've got a string of accomplishments under your belt. What would you say is your personal area of strength?
Well, I think my personal area of strength is really a combination of public relations and personal branding. So I like to figure out how I can take people and turn them into brands and sort of create brand equity around their value in the marketplace.
Excellent. And what in that area of strength is something that businesses don't know but should?
There are so many different things. I mean, I think one is that, so many people are still looking at social media to be this magic bullet for their marketing mix. And I just think that social media is only one component of a marketing mix, and you need all of these other areas, right? And so I think that PR in many ways can, move the needle more so than just traditional social media, and that people need to really create a strategy first before they delve into any sort of tactic. So, I see so many business owners today, they want to jump at the next shiny thing, whatever someone is saying this is what you need, they go for and they try and get that. And I don't think that is necessarily really a great strategy for them. Mm-hmm. And so what you need to do is sort of, open up a Microsoft Word document and take the time yourself to figure out, what are my business goals? What are my objectives? Where do I want to be in the next 5 years? And only then, after you've done that work, do you say, here's how I'm going to plug in PR. Here's how my personal brand plugs into that. Here's how digital marketing plugs into that. But no one actually really takes the time to do that work. Instead, they just say, my competitor's doing social media, so I need to do it too.
Certainly. And you have a lot of experience with PR itself. So what would you say that modern PR looks like as opposed to a traditional point of view?
So traditional PR, right, it's changed so much. Traditional PR, you had all of these gatekeepers, the media gatekeepers that really kept people sort of made it harder unless you had a massive PR firm. It made it much more challenging to get in those publications. Well, now what we're seeing is so many of these outlets are being rolled up and there are acquisitions that are taking place. So this is really shrinking the marketplace in traditional media publications. And so it's led to this whole new rise of digital PR, which is almost a field in of itself. Right? So, for example, a lot of clients that come to me, they don't really want traditional PR because the opportunity for links just doesn't exist with traditional PR. So I think one of the greatest value adds of the new way of practicing PR is the integration of SEO.
Certainly. And when it comes to PR, as you said, people get it wrong or are a bit confused. What would you say is the best way to approach setting up a plan that drives marketing results? You've already alluded to the fact that we should have a broad business strategy and plan, but is there a place for a PR plan as well?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a place for a PR plan. You should have one before you start any sort of work with a firm. So, for example, the first 2 months we start working with new clients, we say we have to create a PR plan for you. We need to understand. We need to create a fact sheet. We need to create a brand story. We need a new about us, a new boilerplate that can be used in releases if we put any out. We need time to gather collateral that we give to reporters, so for example, creating lifestyle photography that we can have, new high-res headshots, revised executive bios. So you really need time to create all of that before you ever pitch the media. It's not as simple as just saying pitch the media if you have no plan. So, as part of that plan, you want to look for what are our high-level public relations goals. For example, are you interested in regional press? Are you interested in national press? Or are you interested in trade publication press? So, I always tell people that trade publications are actually a great resource for people because they're more likely to write a full, profile on you than a consumer-facing outlet that's in the national media.
Certainly. And with the PR plan itself, where does it fit into the broader marketing strategy? Is it something that you should look at once you've reached a certain level in your business, or is it something that, say, a startup could use straight off the bat?
So, it's sort of a complicated answer to that, and it really depends on the business and their goals. So I do think that startups can definitely leverage PR if they have the funding to do it. I always tell startups that you only have, one opportunity to get it right when you have a launch for a new business. And so that sort of opportunity doesn't come around again 5 years later. So you only have one launch. You should launch the release when you can, when you're still new. So if you miss that opportunity, you can't come to us and say, can you put this out? No, you launched 5 years ago. So I think a startup can definitely leverage PR, and it is relevant for startups.
So it's more about the story that would capture the interest of the media and journalists, as well as their audience. Would that be correct?
Correct. It's always about the story. And so we could talk about best practices with that too, right? How do you create a good story? And so one of the things that I think people sort of miss is that there's all of these different layers of who that story can be of interest to. For example, your story could be of interest to a reporter, but it still may not be of interest to that reporter's editor or to the audience of that publication. Right? So there's always several different audiences and layers at any given time when you're pitching a story, and you have to think about who is this going to be of interest to. So it's not enough for a reporter to just love what you're pitching. Their audience and the editor also has to love what you're pitching. And so, I just created a really helpful guide on my site called the Media Relations Guide. It has a lot of interesting tips and helpful tips, for your listeners as well, if they want to take a look at that, where I include some tips from former journalists, but also, one of the interesting statistics that I include is that the ratio is so skewed right now of public relations professionals to journalists, 6-1. Wow. I mean, just imagine that. So those odds are stacked against you, whether you have a PR firm or not. I mean, you have so many more PR professionals and so many fewer journalists, which is sort of making it that much more challenging to get your pitch or story picked up in the media today. So what can you do to differentiate that? And, one of the things I like to talk about is that there's so many different DIY, do-it-yourself PR courses. And I often talk about what I'll call PR negligence and malpractice. That's what I will call it in my community of professionals, because I think that telling someone to sort of do-it-yourself PR can cause collateral damage. And so if you're interested, I can go into what that means.
Sure, absolutely. What sort of damage could people expect?
I don't think people who sort of try and do their own media without formal media training understand how the media works. So for example, these are the people who read some free ebook online or spent $99 on a course, think they're ready to go, And these are the same people that speak to the media, say, oh, this may or may not be off the record. They're sort of floundering around. Then a story comes out and they want it fixed. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand they can't get it fixed because it's not a paid advertisement. Right? They don't actually understand the difference between public relations and advertising from the start. So, and just so your listeners understand that, PR is something that it's a storyline that you put out there that you lack any control of. And advertising is something that you pay for. It's a story you put out with graphics and creative, but you control it. Right? So the two are very different.
Yeah, absolutely. What about ensuring that the story actually drives your business objectives? Because you can have a great piece of content that people love, but say, oh, that was great, and move on, as opposed to taking some action. And also, could you speak into how that drives the ROI of a particular campaign?
Sure. So I think you're touching on a really interesting point, which is sort of PR for the sake of PR without a strategy around it. So you could get some great hit in a national paper, but if it's a hit of you talking about something that has nothing to do with your business objectives, then was it still valuable? And what is the ROI of that? And so the ROI of that may be, not what you'd expect if it has nothing to do with your business at all. And I always tell people it's not about the ROI of any one individual press hit. It's about the ROI of all of these hits together over many years of time. That's why you'll see, for example, most PR firms are going to start out with 6-month agreements or 12-month contracts. No one's really doing a 1-month agreement in PR. And really, ideally, you should be working with a PR firm for many years on end. And it's the reason I say that is not just so that they can keep you on retainer and take your business for eternity. It's so that they can represent you to reporters and develop relationships with them over a long period of time. Because maybe that PR firm will pitch you right now. The reporter can't use you as a source, but maybe they can a year from now, 2 years from now. And so that's why I think it actually helps the client in terms of that. As far as the ROI of public relations, there's many different ways to evaluate this and to measure it. One is that you want to look at Google Search Console and then, analytics on the back end and take a look at, what traffic did this article or this press drive and what is the conversion rate of it. And I always tell people another thing that you want to do, PR for the sake of PR actually really means nothing if you're not doing anything with it, right? So it's not just that you do a podcast or you get featured in an interview. You have to take that and put it on your site. You have to take it and keep a list or a log of all of the press that you've done so that becomes impressive to a producer, a journalist, or a podcaster, or a reporter, right? So one mistake I see people making is that they do all of this amazing stuff. They get these amazing national hits and they do nothing with it. And so I sort of bang my head against the wall and wonder, why are they even doing it? Right? Because if you don't organize that content for people, then it becomes less impressive. So the onus is on you to do that. The onus actually isn't on your PR firm to do that. That's actually a separate service that most PR firms don't do. So if you really want to take your PR campaign to the next level and build a brand, it's all about packaging that content together.
Certainly. So it makes sense, therefore, to have some sort of spreadsheet to track all the stories and PR releases that you've done over the years. Does it also make sense to have some sort of PR template that you could use, or plan template that you could use to build out your plans as they evolve over time?
Do you mean in terms of like different pitches that you could use, or
and also how the plan evolves with your marketing progress?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's another sort of document you can save in Word or, a Google Drive where you can sort of keep periodically updating it. So for example, when you first start out in your business, I started out as more of a generalist. I recently became more of a specialist to healthcare PR. So if I were creating a PR plan, that plan today would be totally different than when I first started. And so today, I'd probably want to do more targeted activities towards getting on the radar of healthcare reporters or journalists in that space so I could reach the audience in that area, as opposed to doing more general stuff, which isn't going to reach that audience. So yes, I think that not only changes your PR plan, it changes any advertising dollars you're spending too.
Certainly. So I would assume that laying out your brand positioning goals is also a key part of that PR plan.
It is, yes.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to forget this one thing that I was going to say,
sure.
which I think is so important for the audience here. It's that it's not about being everywhere. It's about being
Certainly.
somewhere and targeting the person that you want to target. And, so that's what I also try and explain. So, for example, let's look at a comparison. Option A could be a national talk show. Option B could be a podcast that's B2B like this one, where it's really, really specialized. Which is more valuable to you? So if your goal is to say that you got, national coverage, you could choose option A for the talk show. But if your goal is to actually get more clients and conversions for what you do, where you have an opportunity to talk about what you do, it's option B. And so I think that that's something that people, or at least clients or PR clients, don't sort of understand or get still. Which, there's still this allure, which I think is a fallacy of national media, we want that. And it's sort of, it's challenging for me to understand as a PR practitioner, because I look at what's happened, the fragmentation of media online, and I just think there's so many great opportunities to get your message out to a highly specialized audience. And again, that audience may be way smaller, and you may think it's not worth your time, and you're dead wrong on that. Because something that's smaller and specialized is way better than something that reaches the whole country that is not who you want to be reaching or do business with.
Certainly. And when bringing this back to brand positioning, I would imagine that really identifying and clarifying your unique selling proposition would be a key factor. Is there anything else that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I talk about the in terms of brand positioning and the media relations guide, I talk about the 5 W's as well. Why now? Is this time sensitive? Your brand. So for example, let's say you are a physician and then you're a specialist within that. What do you want to be known for, right? Because there are tons of cardiologists. What makes you different? Do you have a specialist? And then keep going further. You have to really niche down and keep going deeper and deeper into that and what that looks like, right? Because just saying, for example, that you are a doctor in this field, that's not having a brand. Having a brand is something where a reporter can go to you and knows that you are the subject matter expert in that specific vertical.
Certainly. Okay.
And I would also like to say that doesn't only happen because of the PR firm you hire, right? The onus is actually on you to do the work and to make that happen. So I always say that with the clients we work with, they all have one thing in common. And this, again, isn't just about my company or the clients I work with. I hope this message is a larger message for PR firms in general, because I think that people make this mistake where they think, I'm going to hire a PR firm and they can sort of do that hard work for me. No, they can't, right? All of these people have one thing in common. Whether they work with me or another PR firm, they're still subject matter experts. They're still key opinion leaders in their field. The difference is that they don't know how to translate that subject matter expertise in digital platforms, and that's where I come in. However, it still exists with or without us. So if you think that you can hire a PR firm and they're going to sort of create that for you, no one can create that for you. No one can join the organizations that you need to join to show that you're involved in your industry. No one can publish articles for you. No one, can be in trade journals for you. You have to do the heavy lifting. And then it's the PR firm's job to take that and package it. But you have to understand that you need to give someone something to work with. And just saying, I've arrived is not enough.
Certainly. Is there, do you find a bit of an educational process with clients before they're even ready to be taken on as a client?
Oh, yes. It's a really steep learning curve. It's funny. I know another practitioner who always says if it's someone's, I always ask how many other firms have you worked with? And I say, well, why do you ask that? And he says, well, if I'm the first firm, I won't do it. Because the learning curve is that steep, right? And then there's so many questions for first-time PR clients. For example, like if you give interview answers, your answer may not be used, right? And so someone who's new to PR journalism doesn't understand that. They think, well, I gave the answer, so what happened to them? Well, remember, let's bring up that 6-to-1 ratio. Because anytime I'm pitching, someone's getting hundreds of other answers too. And then there's also teaching people how to write better interview answers. I mean, there's so many nuances and layers to the field of PR.
Certainly. And how would you actually identify the best outlets to reach your audience? I mean, I would assume that if you're not engaging with a PR firm for the first time, you would have some idea. But are there other ways to start refining where your audience hangs out, and whether it be in terms of journals or other places online or offline?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, typically has an idea of who their target audience is and how they want to reach them. And if you start talking to them, they'll typically say, oh, well, we've advertised in this publication, right? That can be a clue when you're sort of putting together that history of where someone has been. Although that history may not actually be indicative of where they should be going, but it at least helps you understand where they've been. And so you really want to sort of spend the time to understand, why are we doing this, right? And so again, the answer is not because this is newsworthy, right? So there's this problem in the PR field where the client will say, this is newsworthy and put it out. And more PR practitioners need to provide pushback and say, no, it's not. So like they have to provide that lens of the reporter. And if you look at PR firms or publicists and sort of, if there's one line of how you could differentiate them, there's the ones that push back with clients and there's the ones that aren't. And the ones that push back, I would argue, get more hits for people because they're thinking like reporters. And that's why you see so many people in the PR industry today who are former producers, former journalists, really have an understanding of how a newsroom works. And so one thing I'll add here is that, for example, my experience and background, I wrote for Observer for over 2 years as a columnist for them. I understood that process back and forth of what it took to write and being on the other end of pitches. That's an invaluable experience for me to have. I've done over 100 national TV segments and been in a breaking newsroom and environment for all of that. I understand how quickly that works, the pace that it works, and how those pitches look from the other end when they're looking for guests. And so, again, that's just invaluable experience that is really relevant. And I think more PR professionals sort of need to have that training in order to provide the best guidance to their clients.
Certainly. I've noticed that a lot of firms hire content managers or editors with a news or journalism type background. Would you say that could potentially double as the experience and the need to know for potential PR opportunities?
It could, yeah. So I think there's definitely some overlap there. So it could, and I think that's great to hire former writers and journalists as, heading up the content. However, the challenge that I've seen with that is that someone who's a great writer may not necessarily be thinking about what is the best SEO for your site. Right. And so someone who is also a great writer may not be thinking about like, what are your SEO goals? What's going to rank? And then what about the PR strategy? So I think what's happening today is that you have small business owners who are hiring all these people, but in a silo, and none of them are communicating with each other. So you're paying people for jobs, but there's no high level strategy going on. So all of these things are being done. But if you have great writing that doesn't pertain to the words that people are using to find you on search and have no opportunity of ranking on the search pages in snippets or answering questions, that's a problem today. So it's not just about having one skill set. It has to be an overlapping set of skill sets, and you need to have someone that's driving that overall strategy and managing that.
Certainly. And in terms of actually creating this this type of content that you would use for PR in conjunction with anything else that might already be going on in terms of blog posts or other educational, informational pieces that they'll be putting out. How does a PR person need to coordinate with the in-house team in order to develop and coordinate the publishing of content?
So, for example, with our clients, they spend so much time answering interview questions. But as I mentioned earlier, not all of those answers will get picked up. So one of the things that we do is we keep track of all of those answers. And if a placement doesn't run, sometimes their answers are so good actually that I'll think, you know what, I actually hope they don't use this because this is so good they should use this as a blog post on their site. Okay. So that process starts where if that happens, we have a separate service now, which is a blog writing service where we will take that as the backbones and the skeleton of a possible new post for them, and then integrate with the director of content or SEO and optimize it. But what's great is that we already have, the writing is already done. from behalf of the client. And, I truly believe that any writing that's done on someone's blog should come from them. I don't believe in ghosting. I believe in editing, and I believe in optimizing. I don't believe in writing on behalf of a client ever. And perhaps that's because I work with a lot of doctors in the medical field, but I just think it needs to come from them. And so I know there's sort of some debate about that in the content community where people think, I'm going to hire a service and they understand medicine, they could do it for me. And I just think, well, then how are you really a subject matter expert? The whole reason, your whole personal brand that I'm putting out there, or anyone's putting out there for you, is supposed to be because you are the go-to authority. I believe that it's challenging to trust that someone's a go-to authority if someone else is writing on their behalf. No one knows what's inside your head, only you do. Yep. So you have to take that out, put it on paper, and then let someone edit it and optimize it. So that's how they should all work together, to answer your question.
Certainly. Is there an element of planning together as they create that PR plan in terms of content that will be put out or produced?
I think there is, right? So at a larger organization or larger agencies, I think you're going to see more of that. Okay. For smaller ones, unfortunately, I think you don't see that, and it's sort of separate. Yep. But it really depends on the size of the client and agency for that.
Certainly. And once you've got a rough piece that you think has the potential to be used as a pitch, how much more needs to go into developing it in order to make it pitch worthy?
Oh, so you mean for the pitch or the blog post?
It could be the blog post or something specifically for a journal that you've planned out to target.
So I would say for blog posts, you're looking at hours and hours of work to optimize that. Yeah. And you keep doing Google searches to see what other questions people are asking to optimize that content. A pitch is definitely different. So that work is going to be more about, formatting it properly, making sure you're answering any questions that reporter has. I mean, one thing we can talk about, a lot of people use Harrow, help a reporter out as a free service. Most people don't know how to use Harrow properly. And again, it's a free PR tool, but what they do is they don't answer the questions. Harrow is about answering questions. At the end of the day, that's literally what it's about. Harrow is about helping a reporter out. That's what it means. It means they're on deadline. They need you to help them now. Drop what you're doing. And it doesn't mean help them 10 hours from now. It doesn't mean help them tomorrow. It means help them now. So right off the bat, understanding that I think is really critical if you want to increase, your hit rate with Harrow. But the next is, are you actually answering the questions? It doesn't mean answering only the ones you want and skipping the rest or taking questions out. It means answering them. And then the third component of that is giving lengthy answers. Give a reporter a lot that they can pull from. If you give someone one sentence, that's not usable. Yeah. And it's funny because I saw that too, even when I had to, when I was writing for Observer and I did like 2 different roundup guides, I saw it from the other end. And so I saw the struggle. The people that gave you exactly what you wanted, that you put in the query up front and where you didn't have to go back and forth with the PR person 10 times, like that's the person. It's just easier to use so you can move on to the next thing. And so I think if people sort of get, and I also think something that would help people increase their PR hit rate is creating their own podcast or creating their own, blog and quoting other people. The more you start to do that, the more you understand what's really required and how to make it easier for other people to give them what they need. At the end of the day, that's what PR is about.
Yep, certainly. Is there anything else that we should be aware of when crafting pitches for particular journals?
When crafting pitches, so the first thing you want to do is research the writer. Mm-hmm. Look at their beat, research the writer, and look at other things they've written about. And so, don't just say, I saw that you wrote about this story and you left me out. Can you add me, right? Mm-hmm. You want to sort of, and also if they covered it, they're most likely not going to write the same exact article again. Yeah. So take a look at, broad strokes, what they write about, and then say, I happen to read, these other things that you wrote. I have something that I wanted to add if you're working on anything else in this vertical in the future. Introduce yourself, let them know you're a source. Yep. And also if you've published an article in a trade journal, share it with them. You never know if they could add it to what they're doing. And really people want to have a great index or a great Rolodex of sources that they can use. And so it's not just about getting your pitch picked up. It's also about letting someone know you're a source so that when they need you, you're available.
Certainly. I'm just curious, what would you do in instances where, let's say you have an editor for a journal or a magazine of some sort that you'd like to be featured in, but they aren't necessarily producing content themselves that gets featured on that journal or magazine. How would you approach someone like that?
So if they're not, I mean, so are you saying that to propose a guest article within?
And provide content of value to them.
So you can certainly propose that. I would sort of propose the idea before writing the article, because you don't know if they're going to approve the idea. But I would say, this is something I'd be interested in writing for your site.
And how would you stand out? I mean, most editors get hundreds, if not more, by way of pitches. How would you aim to stand out when you know very little about the actual editor and their interests, other than what gets published in the magazine?
Well, again, part of the way to stand out is with that personal branding package, where you're going to put together a list of the other links and other places you've been featured in, and maybe your own writing in your blog where they can see what that looks like. However, I'd also caution people away from necessarily doing that strategy today. I know everyone still wants to do it. The problem is that you sort of lose a little bit of SEO value when you give away your best content to these other sites, right? Because every site needs content, but whose site also needs content? Your own. So I think that people sort of are so, they're thinking so much about this PR benefit of being on these other sites, saying as seen on Forbes or this or that. But what they don't understand is, a lot of these links are no follow links. And yes, Google recently just made some changes with no following what they're doing, and maybe it's going to count, maybe it won't, and back and forth. The point is that some of this will turn into duplicate content if you take it and then put it directly on your site. And again, that's a whole other debate about, is duplicate content a myth? I don't think it is. Some people do. That's another podcast discussion. The point is, I think you should keep your best writing for yourself. If you want to do this other strategy where you write content and you know that you get a follow link, fine. I don't think that you should do it for a bunch of no follow links.
Certainly.
And I don't think that most PR people, by the way, are having this conversation with their clients. And again, I think it's very negligent. They need to be able to understand this, because you can't ask a client to put out their best stuff for a no follow link and not understand you can't be in digital PR and have zero understanding of SEO or what that means. Certainly. And so much of the industry is just operating with their head in the sand about that. And so I think that they need to have those skill sets work together.
Right, certainly. And I would assume that if you're going down this path, then developing a distribution plan would also be important.
A distribution plan for who? Like who you're going to pitch to?
For your content, once it gets published, and if not accepted there, then another potential publication that would pick it up.
Sure. I mean, if you're going down that route, you could do that and have a list of outlets you want to pitch.
Okay. So this would primarily go back to the original PR plan itself and the places that you'd like to be featured in. So you would just focus on that and just distribute a potential story or a piece of content to those specific places. Would that be right?
You would, but so, to answer your question, there are two different types of PR approaches. There's proactive and reactive. So I'm a specialist in reactive PR, and what you're asking about is proactive PR. Proactive PR is about sort of coming up with a plan saying, I want to reach out to these people and then pitching them. Reactive PR is when you're reacting to journalists who are already working on a story and saying, I need a subject matter expert. I've found that the success rate is significantly higher with a reactive PR approach, because you're giving someone what they already need when they're working on it, as opposed to shooting in the dark and hoping that maybe someday they're going to write something. So, I would also say that the thing with the reactive PR approach is that it's dictated by what they're writing on at that moment versus who you ideally want to be pitching.
Right. So that's interesting. So with a reactive approach, you certainly need a library of perspectives and content that you could pull from, I would assume.
Well, so, I mean, for a lot of those, there's no library. It's because all the questions are new and different each time. So I think the library has to exist in your head. And I tell clients this all the time. You have to really understand the breaking news in your industry in order to be able to meet the needs of journalists if you're going to do reactive PR. because they're going to ask you, can you comment on this? And you don't know what it is they're talking about, then you're going to lose with reactive PR. So the best thing you could do is follow the news in your industry every single day so that you are ahead of the curve when they say, oh, Instagram is, removing the follow feature of other people to see what they're doing, which I think they just did, right? Like last week or something. You know what they're talking about, right? So because if I go to a client and say, what do you think about this feature? And they go, what are you talking about? We're going to lose that opportunity. But if that client if that person's already following that, they're going to be able to give me an answer in 2 seconds. So that's the thing. Part of a reactive PR approach is that you have to dedicate at least an hour every day to reading the news.
Certainly. And I'm assuming that you would very much be using social listening and tools in that space to keep track of all that's going on, especially with journalists and media.
So I would say Harrow is just one tool in that arsenal. There's a ton other. And I think, the cool thing right now is that there's new technology that's being created as, I would say like a Harrow 3.0 or like something that will sort of bridge the gap with social media and what reporters are working on. So we're seeing some of that technology come out right now, which I think is an exciting time for the PR industry. I hope that the whole industry shifts in that direction. And, one area that, that doesn't exist in is TV. And getting guests for TV. So I would like to see something like that happen in TV too. It would be interesting for the industry. Certainly. I don't know if it will ever happen, but it would be cool if it did.
Certainly. Taking that same thought and applying it to social media, because even news clips and things of that nature can be viewed on social media. What are there tools that allow for that engagement with like podcast hosts or a live TV, live video streaming hosts and things of that nature?
Sure, there's different podcast aggregation sites right now where you can find different podcast guests. There's a few resources out there. I think a lot of them are paid. At this point, Cision also has some paid services. So as an agency, we pay a ton every year for all of these different services. I know that Harrow is definitely a free one. The other ones we use, I would say, aren't free at this time. So that's one of the value benefits of working, the main benefits I would say of working with an agency is that they're covering the cost of all that for you. Just like if you work with an SEO firm, you're assuming that they're paying for all of those tools.
The tools, yeah. How important would you say video is, even if you're not being featured on other channels, whether it be a major distribution network or a TV station, on, say, channels, we're talking B2B here, so let's say LinkedIn.
Oh my God. So that's what I was going to answer. I mean, video is so important right now on LinkedIn. They're practically giving away organic views right now. LinkedIn right now, in terms of video, the links, the views are off the charts compared to Facebook. It is what Facebook was many years ago in terms of getting people to see that content right now. And so I think that is, incredibly interesting, and you need to be creating video in between your press hits. So, there's also another problem that I talk about with clients with PR, where if you were to create a chart, right, of the client creating this critical mass in a very short amount of time, their content has to back up their PR. It can't just be that you've gotten featured in 20 places, but you're not publishing content to support the subject matter expertise behind that. Or else it looks like the PR firm did all this great work, but where is the content to back it up? And so again, this is what I call strategic PR. Most PR professionals don't get involved in this component of it, right? Because their job is to get the client hits, they get the hits, they think their job is done. I disagree. I think it's not. I think you need to guide a client with this holistic approach to what is actually best for them. Because if you get a bunch of hits in all of these outlets in a really fast amount of time, right? That can, in a way, can almost damage your credibility, because suddenly you come out of the woodwork, where'd this person come from? And you're not putting out content to back that up. So you need to sort of, again, do all of this in a very integrated fashion. I'd also say that, again, with the media fragmentation and so many live streaming and digital options right now, everyone thinks, I only want to be on traditional television broadcast channels. And look at the success of Cheddar or some of those other outlets. Those are great opportunities, as long as you can get great video links from it.
Certainly. So for someone who is perhaps uncomfortable with putting themselves on the screen, what would you say would be a good place to start and start thinking about content that they could use or create around the video and place on channels like LinkedIn?
So this is an interesting question. And so I think everyone is really good in doing what makes them most comfortable. If you are really uncomfortable in front of a camera, it's hard for me to say that you should definitely be doing video. Even if the market dictates that you have to do video right now, it's hard, I can't necessarily say you should do it. However, you may be more comfortable doing something like a podcast, and then that may make more sense for you. You should do what you shine in. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't just do everything because everyone tells you have to be everywhere. Do the thing that you're best at. So for example, right, there's people who are conference speakers and they're on the circuit, and that's their thing. Yeah. Those same people may not, shine on air. Just like someone who's on air may not shine being at a conference around a bunch of people because they're more introverted. Like, you have to know your strengths and then let someone else know what they are, and then you develop a plan around that. But don't develop a plan around your insecurities or doing something that you don't like or you're not comfortable with because a PR person tells you to.
So play to your strengths and yes. Comfort levels as well.
Yeah, you know why? Because your content's going to be better. If you're like, it's sort of like, women. I'll give you the best example. A woman who wears a dress and they're not comfortable in it, people always say, well, you shouldn't wear that. Wear what you're comfortable in. Yeah. Because then you're not thinking about your dress. You're thinking about what you're saying. It's sort of the same logic here.
Sure. Excellent. In parting, what would you say is your top tip in creating predictable B2B success?
My top tip in creating predictable B2B success is to understand that this is not going to be sort of a one-off approach. You have to be doing content marketing, PR, personal branding, digital marketing, plus social media, all in unity, right? So you can sort of determine at any time where you want to increase the level of, X percentage on each one of those areas, but it's not going to be something where you just decide not to do any one of those areas for any extended length of time. So you need to sort of stay in the game. And I see a lot of people that get amazing results with any one of those areas, and they get the results and they rest on their laurels. And that is not a way to have predictable B2B success. I'd also say you want to sort of understand what's changing in B2B so that you don't, feel like a dinosaur in what you're doing, right? I always tell people I started my company as an entrepreneur when I graduated college, Boston University at 21. I'm about, 32 now, turning 33. I can still feel like a dinosaur at my age too. And so I like to sort of share that with people because dinosaur doesn't have to do with age. It has to do with the amount of time you're in any given industry and what changes that industry has had over that length of time. And so if I was still practicing like I did, when I was 21, well, I'd be out of business, right? So you have to sort of keep innovating and stay in the game. Yeah.
Excellent. If someone listening to this wanted to find out more or hit you up with a few questions, where would you recommend that they head to?
Sure. So you can head to rubymediagroup.com. I also have krisruby.com and medicalpracticepr.com. On Twitter, I am at Sparkling Ruby and at Ruby Media Group. And of course, you can always add me on LinkedIn as well.
Thanks so much, Kris.
Thank you for having me.